So excited to have you here today. Today's microlearning is on how to stop playing small by using strong, powerful language with our one and only Joanne Lauterbach. Top right-hand side, actually, before we do that, in the chat, I am going to post right now, for those who are kind of joining late, a survey that Joanne's company, Vate Communication, created to see whether you use minimizing language or not. I'm also, maybe during the break, going to also put that in the live stream as well. Or if someone who is on the call can do it for me on LinkedIn in the chats, that would be great. But take the quiz because it's going to be very enlightening. And it only takes 2 minutes. Just look in the chats. For those who are watching via live stream, I will post in a second unless someone, in this community can post on my behalf. So before we begin, in the chat, please enter your name, what city you're calling in from. And if you want to network and continue the conversation offline, then add your LinkedIn profile. For those who are watching this via live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, we want you in the conversation as well. So tell us where you're coming from in the comments. For those who are in the live Zoom audience, in the chat. And feel free to connect, ask questions in the comments. If something really resonates with you, tell us in the comment. If you have pieces of advice or a funny story to share, do it in the chat, in the comment. This is a conversation, right? Even though we're focusing on Joanne and her learning, we want this to be kind of a fun dialogue. So someone commented earlier recently, and I realized that I do this, is I never actually really introduce myself before these talks. I just go straight into the content. So starting from now, I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Lan Fan. I'm the founder and CEO of Community of 7. My job is really to bring people together to talk. And my company is built on the premise that magical things happen when you bring people together and when you bring people together as a community. As such, at Community of 7, we bring leading executives, thought leaders, change makers together with the goal of making this world a better place, one conversation at a time. So this is a microlearning. What's a microlearning? It's a training and development that focuses on offering bite-sized small learning units with just the right amount of information to help learners achieve a goal. So we really want you to actually take this to the real world and learn something and actually, apply it to your day-to-day life. And these Tuesday talks are always free. Our goal is to democratize training and development and mindset building for all. We know that corporate executive training is very expensive, so this is kind of my one way to give back. And we also have a global audience. And, it's kind of the training and development that I wish I had when I was moving up the corporate world. I didn't really get corporate training until I was way into the C-suite. So if you're interested in learning more or getting deeper involved in Community of 7, we have a supporter membership that is just $99 a year, and it includes communications from me and coaching circles. You can go to the communityof7.com website and join. Once again, just $99 a year. So without further ado, I'm so excited for today's microlearning, how to stop playing small by using strong, powerful language with Joanne Lauterbach. Before we begin, a few questions. Top right-hand side, I want you to put this in gallery mode. For those who are in the live audience, if you could turn on your videos just for a second, that would be awesome. I'd like to start each call with some questions. You ready? So if you agree, or if the answer is yes, you can raise both hands like this. If you strongly agree, you might want to wiggle your fingers, okay? So first question, how many of you find yourself using qualifiers or diminishing language like, actually, I'm sorry, just? I know this sounds stupid, but both hands if you agree. For those who are in the live stream, just type in yes or yes. How many of you upspeak? In other words, you end a sentence as a form of a question. For example, does that make sense? Don't you think? Okay. How many of you use just often in a sentence? For example, instead of I'll do it, it's I'll just do it, or it's just that. Okay, I'm raising my hand way too much for this. Who has ever felt frightened or anxious speaking at meetings or at events? I still get frightened. Who has been afraid of saying the wrong things at a meeting? How many of you come to important meetings a few minutes before to settle in and connect with the attendees or coworkers or whoever's in the room? How many of you spend a minimum of 60 minutes prepping for a meeting? Awesome, thank you. So top right-hand side, put this in speaker mode so you just see me right now. So welcome to Community of Seven, AKA C7's microlearning series, where we feature leading executives and subject matter experts and leaders in the industry to discuss the essential mindset and skill set needed to grow your career and personal life. These talks are microlearnings wrapped in a conversational format. Today's topic is how to play small, how to stop playing small by using strong, powerful language. This is not a webinar where you passively listen. We want you participating. So be active in the comments and the chat. If you have some advice, tell us in the chat. If something really resonates that Joanne says, let us know in the chat, in the comments, okay? So before we begin, I'd like to provide a quote by Chris Carr to set the tone. It's not about finding your voice. It's about giving yourself permission to use your voice. So why is it so darn hard, right? A study found that speaking up at work is problematic for at least half of all employees, that's 50%. In a study by MIT Sloan conducted with over 6,000 Microsoft employees, only 13.6% of those surveyed said they speak up at work. Only 13.6% surveyed said they speak up at work. And this is a leading company like Microsoft, 6,000 employees. And 17.5% said they don't speak up at all. Another interesting stat that really blew my mind. In an average meeting, only 3 people do 70% of the talking. Mind blown. Let me read that again. In an average meeting, 3 people do 70% of the talking. You probably know who those people are too, right? And hopefully that's not you, and that you're sharing the opportunity to speak at meetings. So now let's talk about why people, leaders, and organizations who are on this call should care. Research has shown that employees who felt comfortable sharing their thoughts and voices at work produced various benefits for employees in the organization, including better engagement, better customer service, reduced turnover, and greater operational efficiency. And as we talk about how to stop playing small by using strong, powerful language, we're really confronting what I think is 2 issues, right? One, just being able to speak up, period, right? And 2, making sure that when we do speak, we're not diminishing ourselves with diminishing language. And instead, we use powerful language. The use of minimizing language causes a loss of credibility with the speaker. It undermines the impact of their message, calling to question their qualifications. The speaker is taken less seriously, appears less confident, and their message is watered down. The use of these qualifiers is self-diminishing in itself. And as a speaker, you fail to command the power that you really want to actually convey. So really quick question. This is a speed round. In the comments or the chat, I want you to answer this, but I don't want you to press send yet, okay? So for those who are on the live stream and those who are in the live Zoom audience, in the chat or the comment, I want you to type in the answer to this, but don't press send till I tell you. What do you think is the #1 reason why people don't speak up at work, in meetings, at home? Okay, so type that answer right now in the comments in the chat. For those on live stream, do the same thing. Don't press till I tell you. What is the #1 reason do you think that people don't speak up at meetings, in life, whatever it may be, right? I'm gonna count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, press send. They're afraid of speaking, shyness, insecurity. They don't feel that what they say will be valued. Fear of being judged, fear to make a mistake, fear of retribution. So I see a lot of fear I see a lot of being introverted, shy, social anxiety, and I see a lot of judgment, right? Am I missing anything else? Fear of being judged, not taken seriously, criticism. They kind of are interconnected. It seems like there's really three main buckets, right? So this is why this conversation that we're having today is so meaningful and so powerful. Your voice defines the value that you bring to the world, whether it be at work, at home, or with a significant other, or even in your community. Your voice tells the world who you are. That's why even if it rocks some boats, you can't be afraid to use your voice. And for some of you that read my post on a daily basis, I always talk about lifting your voice, right? It's also crucial for you to realize that the people that you think are amazing, eloquent speakers, right? You might see them at work, you might be a politician, you name it, right? They didn't all start that way. They too were scared of saying the wrong things. They also were scared to rock the boat. They were also scared to be judged. But here's the thing, they were afraid and they spoke up anyway. And after a while, it gets a little bit easier. Here's the thing, I'm an introvert. I get anxious before any of these calls. Keep in mind, I've spoken to the UN, to leading NGOs, world leaders, and CEOs. I've talked to C-suite execs for a good part of my career. And here's the thing, to this day, I still get scared. I even get scared talking in front of my third grade daughter's classroom on Parents' Day, like literally sweating scared. Here's the thing, you can be afraid and still do it anyway. For me, it was a realization that my voice mattered. If I wanted to fulfill my value and purpose of helping others and being a force for good, I needed to speak up. I needed to own my voice. So without further ado, I am so excited to introduce my guest right here. Let me just pin her real quick. Hi, Joanne. How's it going?
Hi, Lan.
Hello. So Joanne Lauterbach is the founder of VAPE Communication Training, someone I admire. She's the founder of VAPE Communication, where she trains executives on how to use more confident language. She was born in Jamaica, but has lived, worked, and was educated in several countries. Her career in business and entrepreneurship is vast. She has spent 25 years in leadership positions in century-old blue-chip companies. She's led countless entrepreneurs to succeed in the Caribbean's first business incubator. She has honed the business communication expertise, skills, and self-knowledge that she now models and teaches to clients in her Toronto-based practice, VAPE Consultants. She has trained thousands of professionals and corporations, including RBC, TD Bank, Microsoft, Chubb Insurance, BCG, KPMG, and Bell Canada. Welcome, Joanne. So in your work with leading executives worldwide, you teach leadership communication training for leaders in different cultural settings. What's one thing that you find is a universal commonality? What's a main issue that most people face when it comes to public speaking?
We heard it right here. It's fear. So we know that the statistic is there that so many of us have this, well, not all fears are rational. We know this, have a deep fear of public speaking for the reasons that were in the chat. And whether it's public speaking or speaking up at a meeting or advocating for yourself or trying to go for the next position, all of these things are laden with fear because of the stories we tell ourselves. So the work that I do is really introspective. Fear is real because I know that feeling, that beating heart feeling, right? And give me a signal if you've had it, where there's something you want to say and you don't, or you say it and it doesn't quite come out the way you hoped it would have. So this fear is real, and how do we get through it is the work that I do. from an assertiveness standpoint with women around the world. And it comes down to, breaking a habit, Lan. You said there's these things that come out of your mouth and it's hard to break. Our communication is a collection of habits. So whether I'm working with people in London, England, or Kingston, Jamaica, or Toronto or New York, I'm dealing with people who have challenges in trying to get people on to their side. By and large, we're talking about persuasion, not forcing people to do things they don't want to do, which means we have to use our communication wisely and let our words represent our worth. So if we have fears holding us back, it can manifest in language that does not serve us when we do actually speak.
It's so powerful. Let our words define our worth. Did I quote that right? That's beautiful.
Almost. Our words, I believe our words represent our worth. And there's so many things that we didn't get to choose when we were, put on this planet. I couldn't choose the color of my skin, my height, where I was born, the people I was born to, but I can tell you, I can choose the words that come out of my mouth. And if I am made aware of some of the words that are coming out, because I have someone feeding it back to me who cares, or I film myself, so I start to know, and I take a look and compare that to the brand that I want to represent and have people know me as. And I do like a bit of an alignment check to make sure that my words are aligned. So if I want people to think of me as a strategic, integral part of the team in an organization, then chances are diminishing language is not going to be on brand. So I can't deliver my well thought out idea and then tag it with, that makes sense to you, or right. Or before I even share the idea, because I'm nervous and I'm afraid that maybe somebody else at the table is going to disagree, and I'm a people pleaser and I don't want an argument. I may preface it by softening it deliberately, by saying something like, hey, you probably know better than me, or I'm no expert. And then I deliver my well thought out idea. And they simply can't hear it the same way. So my words are not representing my worth, and I'm not actually being my authentic self when I diminish and I minimize.
So I kind of want to go back to the notion of fear, right? Forget even getting to the using diminishing words. If you're not even afraid to speak up, what is your advice to the folks who are on this call or to the executives that you work with, to kind of like, how do they deal with the fear? Because I think that's the first hurdle. Okay.
For people who want to have voice at the table but find that they just can't, it's the moment passes them by. My number one recommendation is to prepare in advance the words that you want to say. So you're not actually speaking off the cuff. And one of the people best known for speaking off the cuff was Winston Churchill. And he famously said, my best off the cuff remarks were prepared. So you go into that meeting, or once a week, you could say, dedicate half an hour to the kind of conversations that you plan to, that you know you're going to have this week, and plan what sort of message do you want to deliver? Is there a call to action? Structure yourself so you can go in with a plan, so you're not thinking of it on the fly in the meeting. Practice it as well. So if the stakes are high, get somebody you trust to role play it with you. Or we're all so much more comfortable on Zoom now, seeing ourselves. Open up a Zoom line and just with yourself and record yourself doing it, and then assess it. In my work, Lan, I'm never surprised to hear somebody say, I had no idea I was saying those words, Joanne. because we don't really know what's coming out of our mouth. So there is great value in raising your awareness so that you can make the tweaks, small tweaks that can have a huge impact on your delivery. So these minimizing words came in, you learn to use them, and if you want, you can certainly unlearn the habits.
I love that. And I love the advice in terms of preparation, because I know for me as an introvert and someone who's kind of recovered from like social anxiety, preparing for a meeting was so scary for me. But what helped was I would literally prepare for an hour for a 30-minute meeting. And so when I came in, I had my talking points and all this other stuff. And same thing, it would just even speaking today, like I do a lot of prep work before I actually have the call, right? Another thing that was helpful for me is reframing things, right? Because the feeling of anxiety, fear is the same thing as excitement. So before a call, I still feel this anxiety, even though I've done this hundreds of thousands of times, I still get nervous. And I'm like, I'm so excited. And I tell myself, I'm so excited so turning that fear and anxiety, because that emotion to my body is the same as excitement. So that's kind of helped me as well. Yeah. So today we're talking really about how to use strong, powerful language, but can you explain, and you started talking about self-diminishing language and how it impacts our effectiveness as speakers. How is it connected with the converse, which is using powerful language? Are they kind of interrelated? And can you give examples of both? And I want to kind of point out to someone in the chat, let me look for it, made up a good point. Let me find it, the comment. Okay, and Grace Brady says, in terms of diminishing language, I've been taught that questions like, does that make sense? Or I agree, leads to buy-in when needed. Can you discuss? So diminishing language, but can it actually be used, in negotiations or whatnot?
There's a lot there, Lan. I want to start with the fair piece. So the most common reason cited for people, why do you use it? So if you did the survey, one, it's how are you minimizing? And two, why do you think you're minimizing? The number one reason, well, there are two, they're neck and neck. One is, I'm afraid to be seen as bitchy or aggressive. So being assertive gets conflated with being aggressive, and we overcorrect into passive because God forbid you think I'm aggressive. And we women, there's something called the double bind, which we know is well researched. So I can say the exact same words as a man and be perceived differently. So this is the reality that we're in. So it makes good sense.
Yeah.
Why we are afraid. Sometimes we've even been given advice to tone it down, or you're coming off a little strong. I mean, especially if you're a woman of color as well, these things are real. So in my work, I don't pretend like we live in utopia. We don't. But that doesn't mean we should diminish, in my opinion. But it goes back to your brand. So your words represent who you are. It is the strongest indicator to people with the perceptions that they make. So we get to choose. So diminishing language will send off one signal. We're going to get to the negotiation piece in a bit, but the number one is I don't want to be seen as bitchy. And the number two is it feels polite and friendly. That's how I was raised. So it's not something that I'm trying to avoid. I was told that.
I love that. And Will Sullivan has a great in the comments right now. Remember, we came from Will Sullivan, who I love. Remember, we came from an extremely conservative, patriarchal world. We were expected to shrink to fit the room.
Correct.
Mic drop. Right.
Yeah, and so we're not going to forget that. And we use that within the context to say, well, given all of that, given our socialization, the way we have learned to get by, does that serve us now? And is there an alternative that would better serve us? because being assertive means simply being able to clearly communicate by taking the person in front of you's interest, respecting them and yourself equally. It's not aggressive. So there's a spectrum. So when we get a handle on, well, is this actually aggressive, or am I afraid I'm going to sound aggressive? And it's actually assertive. If I have direct reports, Lan, and they didn't provide a report to me that they were to have done that, that they're late in doing that, and I want to ask them, where's the report? I see people smiling. Am I doing my job? Am I doing them any favors if I say, hey, sorry to bother you. I know you're really busy, but I wonder if maybe you could let me know if possibly you could maybe get this report back to me on time. I'm just doing my job. I'm not being mean. I'm not being aggressive. So an alternative might sound something like, hi, I noticed the report wasn't in yet. In order for us to do what we have to do, I've got to get it by the end of the day.
But you know what? There is that double bind, that double standard, because if a man were to say the exact same thing, it would be taken differently.
Yes, so the double bind is real. And the way I help women navigate, and we all have to navigate it in the way that works for us, but the way that the example I use with myself is that I watch my nonverbals. I make sure they're very open, especially when I'm meeting you for the first time, because a choice could be to diminish myself, which for me is off-brand. So pre-COVID, I would be doing training in corporate boardrooms across North America and beyond, walking into rooms of strangers. And so first impressions count quickly. And in many times, they weren't expecting a 5'3" brown girl to come in and talk to them about leadership. So I refused to diminish myself by saying, I bet you didn't expect to see me because I have a 2-day workshop to talk about leadership. It's not going to work for me or for them. So instead, well, I'm seated right now, but I would make sure my body language was open, smiling more than maybe I'm used to. And those sorts of adjustments for me help me stay assertive and approachable. And that's the double bind. It's hard to be seen as both likable and a leader if you're a woman. That's
so
where it's
much
tricky.
Work.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
if anybody
Reality, right?
Yeah. Hey, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she cited an example that was similar when they almost took her off the trail in the first campaign back in 2007, I guess, because she was being called an angry Black woman. And Michelle was like, I'm passionate. Passion can get misperceived really easy. And if you're a Black powerful woman, yeah, gets into angry Black woman space super fast. But this is an accomplished speaker who was really at this stage, the campaign almost took her off the trail. You're hurting his chances, they said. So she got some coaching and they showed her video and she adjusted her body language to be more approachable. That's it. Pair the openness with the assertive language instead of diminishing is a big strategy.
So it was something as simple for Michelle Obama as her body language. Was it like softening her voice as well? Or like what were the other, just body language?
No, again, okay, I'm gonna bring my desk up so I can stand. Hold on. When I'm in a workshop, I'm usually standing. Ooh.
I'm short either way, so even when I stand, people can't tell the difference.
Okay, so I'm standing now.
Yeah.
So in the Michelle Obama case, it is making sure those arms are open. This is going to throw off something that doesn't serve. This is just the body.
Oh, that's my standard pose. Doing everything
Yeah.
wrong.
And the hands. So how can we be open? How can we bring people in? Smiling. Sometimes it's as simple as smiling more authentically, not fake smiling, but making sure that as you hold the line with your assertiveness, that you are still dealing with the approachability factor. If you're a woman, men don't have to, listen, men minimize too. I work with men as well. This is not a woman only phenomenon. But the perceptions are different. Sometimes it can work to men's advantage. So back to that negotiation question.
You know what really helped me, Joanne, with public speaking, and again, I'm a little embarrassed to even share this, is that my daughter's kindergarten, all the parents had to come and read to the kindergarteners, and I was scared shitless because I was like, I just didn't want to see these big eyes just looking at me, and so I really had to become, because corporate speaking before, it was very kind of dry. Like I would say it was eloquent, but I wasn't really animated. And with reading, you have to be like you really kind of like excited and change your intonations. And I literally prepped for like 2-3 days to read to my daughter's kindergarten. I know, embarrassing, but that really helped me in my public speaking in the corporate world, because I learned that I had to be more animated, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that example. We need more of that in presentations. And because when we're talking to children, we want to really make sure they understand. So we use vocal variety, and there's emphasis, and we use, gestures and all of that, because we're working for their attention. And so that same mindset needs to be brought into the professional workspace to make us more engaging, for sure. I've worked with people and told them, pretend you're reading to your kid.
So that does work.
It does work. Or you're talking to your best friends.
Yeah.
Get out of that sort of default, oh, it's just business, I'm trying to nail it. And then it's hard to engage people like that.
So let's talk about it just business, or you have to be quote unquote professional, right? You guys have all seen me talk. I sometimes am informal. I sometimes will use some potty words, whatever it may be. But I want to be my authentic self. And this is who I am. This is how I speak when I'm at home. This is how I speak to you guys. So, but it might not be quote unquote professional. So how do we bring our authentic self? And especially when you're a person of color, or you're a woman, or you might come from a different cultural background, how do you remain your authentic self, but not be called out for not being quote unquote professional?
I think the definition of professional has undergone some massive change, especially in COVID. When we're seeing in the early days of COVID, all of these people, Jimmy Fallon in his living room, and Anderson Cooper at home, I do believe there's been a recalibration and a move to embrace authenticity. I, for one, double down on who I am. I do not code switch. And that's me as a professional, just like you're describing yourself. This is who you are. I have met people who have tried to alter their accents. So Trinidadians working in Toronto say, oh boy, the people don't understand me. I'm gonna just not speak like this. My bad Trini accent. And they can't keep it up. And they confuse people, and they are better served simply being themselves. Again, back to the stories we tell ourselves. So if you get advice that is well-intentioned, I think you know the difference. So are there adjustments you can make that don't make you feel inauthentic, that can help you better position yourself as a professional? I say go for those. Like the one I gave, I smile more when I'm meeting new people because I'm doing the approachability. I'm riding that double bind. I don't feel inauthentic. I don't feel like I'm compromising myself.
And just a disclaimer for the folks who are on this call and not sure what code switching is. It's basically when the way you talk, maybe at home or culturally, is different than, or to feel like you feel there's a need for you to talk differently at work. I don't know if you have another way to kind of
No,
define it.
I think that's great. It's like the sanitized version of who you are, so it's more palatable for those that you work with.
Yeah. So Tala has a good question here. What about discussing uncomfortable issues at work? You know, using your voice and all this other stuff. When it comes to comfortable conversations, she had an example of decolonization, but it could be race, it could be violence, it could be a multitude of things, right? A toxic boss. How do you have these uncomfortable conversations, own your voice, but not offend or to get people to actually listen to you?
So this takes us beyond diminishing language into how do you effectively communicate. So I would say it's in how you structure a difficult conversation. I have been known to say, I don't believe there are anything. I don't believe that something is necessarily a difficult conversation. If you get audience centered, if you understand why it's in the person's interest for them to hear you, that'll help you get out of what you want to say to what they need to hear to accept the logic of what you're saying. So it needs to be audience centered, which means you need to find something in there, a benefit for them. I want to give you one example of a difficult conversation with a coach that I worked alongside with. There was a gentleman, and you may think it's politically incorrect. That's fine. I'm going to give the example anyway, because it's one from the corporate trenches. I was working with a lady who had a gentleman in front of her who really wanted to progress, but he started off in the mailroom, and he had gone really far, and he was in this training and getting all of this fantastic leadership training, which meant they saw his potential. But he still kind of saw himself as that person who had started off in a much lower position. And she looked at him and said, "You're sloppy." Yeah. And I thought, oh, wow. So this is difficult. And most of us, I would never want to say this. I don't know what kind of reaction I'm going to get. It could go sideways and fast. But what I learned from this is that our intentions show. So she wasn't insulting this guy. It was an act of vulnerability for her to tell him something she thought would actually shift his trajectory. She was not trying to be mean. She was really helping him. So she said, I believe, so she messaged him, I've watched you over the 2 days, and I believe you can physically dress in a way that better represents your potential and who you are, because people will see you in the light that you want them to see. And I believe the way you are showing up is getting in your way. So that is an example of what some people say, I would never touch that. Right? So how are you getting into the person's head to message them effectively, so that after you say something like that, they ask you one of two questions. Why do you think so? Maybe they still you didn't give them enough context. They need to know why, and then be prepared to tell them why. Or, how do you think I can make a change? It's one of those two questions. Sometimes it's both. So if you're in that difficult situation, yeah, okay, so break it down. What message would you want this person to hear from you, and what would you want them to act and do? But before you can message somebody like that, you have to give them really good context. that will set them up to hear it. And a good message has a benefit to the person plus the action you want. So it's positive, it's never negative. Therefore, it's not aggressive. It's simply clear and assertive, and it's not passive aggressive. Passive aggressive, I think, is worse than aggressive and more prevalent. People don't want to offend you. They don't say things and you don't even know what's up. That's a problem. So being assertive, and what I teach people to do, frankly, is to speak clearly.
Your story about that gentleman kind of not having the confidence or the self-doubt kind of reminds me of this story. I was watching this interview and it was with a physical therapist from a big sports league. And she was saying how she had this one athlete that she was working with and that he was constantly rude to her, would keep on, give her really short, curt answers, yes, no, whatever it is. And she couldn't figure out why he didn't like her. So one day she was just frustrated and she was like, why don't you like me? Why are you so rude to me? And he looked at her and he's like, I don't have anything against you. This is, I just don't speak well. And she paused for a second and she was like, who told you that you don't speak well? And so he thought about it for a moment. And he was like, he figured out that when he was in first grade, one of the teachers asked him to read out loud to the class. He read out loud and the teacher said, you're not a good speaker. And so the woman looked at him and just said, so who's telling you're not a good speaker now?
Yeah.
And he said, me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us have internalized this. And this is why I post daily on Community of 7. We have been beaten down in the corporate world from people who may not believe in us or tell us we can't do this. There's been so many times I've been told I can't write, I can't speak, I can't do X, Y, Z. And it takes a lot of mental fortitude to still speak, to still write, right? Even when your confidence is faltering. So I think that's why it's so powerful what you're doing in terms of really getting people to speak, to talk, because that is you, that is the representation of your soul and what you believe in. And if you're not speaking, no one's going to hear you.
That's right. The stories we tell ourselves are the most important stories of all. And some of these stories are driving the habit loops, and they don't serve, and they can be broken as well. So when I do my work, I do work on brand. I get people to figure out what their brand is, but I also have a section on imposter syndrome. And what are you telling yourself? And how is that playing into some of these communication habits? Because if you're saying to yourself, when you get nervous, oh my God, they're going to think I'm stupid, or I'm not 100% right. Maybe I'm a recovering perfectionist, and unless I've got like every I dotted and T crossed, there's no way I'm going to raise this idea because they're going to shoot me down. And all of that's up in my head. That is going to severely impact the words that come out of my mouth. So it's those stories. And so that's part of the work too. So I don't believe in breaking, in taking all of the energy to say, okay, I'm not going to say sorry anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do that anymore. I take it more from a mental space. How do I want them to see? I choose. And if there are stories that I'm telling myself that do not serve me, then I need a new story. And what's that story going to be? And what sort of words? So in minimizing, sometimes we can just get rid of the words. We can get used to pausing instead of tagging the end of our sentences. We can do that. We can, instead of when somebody says, wow, you've done a really good job, Joanne, instead of saying, oh, it was nothing, I can say, from here on out, I simply say, thank you. Done. Thank you. And so we can start to pick and choose, but that's because a switch has been flipped in our head. And that helps the process of breaking the habits, and they can be broken. So if I choose a few brand words that have nothing to do with minimizing, then my language will start to change.
Some great comments in the chat. David Hansen, we can get 20 compliments, but we all too often remember the one negative comment.
For real.
Also, Rachel, oh, I just lost it. We can give our inner critic way too much headspace. Yes, let's kick the inner critic out. And then, so one of the questions, let's open the questions. Rocio Alegria, do you want to unmute and ask your question, or do you want me to ask the question for you?
You can ask it for me because
Okay.
my voice is done. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. So Rocia has a question, and then we'll ask, then Rachel will unmute after I ask this question. Can you please tell me what are the powerful words to use when you're giving a meeting so we don't sound demanding or bitchy?
When you're giving a meeting,
or like when you're like, you know, holding a meeting or whatnot, or organizing a meeting, what powerful words can you use that?
so like if you're opening the meeting.
Perhaps.
So here's an example, Rusia. I've called a meeting, everybody is busy, including me, and we all get on the Zoom call or in person if you're lucky enough. And I started off by saying, oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I know how busy you are. You know, you're taking time out of your schedule to come here. It's so great. That seriously, thanks. We can overthank, just like apologize unnecessarily. So that's one way of doing it. So an alternative might be, good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see you all. Let's jump in. And then off to the races.
So Rachel, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Absolutely. So my question is around self-deprecating humor. Is that something in a meeting or when we're speaking that you find that minimizes ourselves, or a way to connect with the audience? Because humor is something I like to use, but I found that sarcastic humor, sarcasm, Greek word meaning cut, doesn't always land well. And so I tend to defer to self-deprecating humor when I want to use it. But what are your thoughts on that?
My preference is not to do it. Humor is one of these things where we all think we have a good sense of humor, like a good sense of style. We can't all have a good sense of humor and a good sense of style. And so we don't know how it's going to land. So some people use it. This can be cultural too. So if I was speaking to a Brit, they're far more comfortable with self-deprecating humor. That's standard, you know. Again, we get to choose. Is there an alternative? Why are you leaning on self-deprecating humor? Would be something I would invite you to explore a little bit. What would it look like if instead of self-deprecating humor, you went in with something super creative? You went in to hold their attention straight from the beginning. So we have defaults, and something like self-deprecating humor is, for me, again, I can only speak personally. For me, I wouldn't go with it because I think there are other options that would better serve.
So we actually had Kathy Klotz-Guest, and she's a comedian, come in and do a micro learning probably about 2-3 months ago. And what she said, which I think was helpful, was if you're going to, you know, use self-deprecating humor, make sure it's not deprecating or like negatively reflect your professional skills. For example,
Okay.
I will make fun of my cooking all day at work, or because I don't really care if you like my cooking or not, right? But I'm not going to talk about my abilities. Does that make sense? Oh, and I just used self-diminishing language.
Yeah. So we're going to use that. Lan, that's a great example. You're not going to get up and say, I'm really, hey, you're in for a horrible, you're in for a horrible workshop because I hate to speak. Everybody, the audience doesn't want to hear that. So back into that skill, I get that 100%. And you will hear it a lot of times with people who don't like to speak. Maybe not as egregious as that example now, but I'm so nervous. And we, the audience, start to feel nervous. That is not what you want for your audience. So that is more helping you, the speaker, relax. So I would say, what are the alternatives that better serve you? Should you be deep breathing instead of to relax, and have your intro nailed so that when you come on stage, you're going to be a little nervous, but that first couple of sentences flow, while also reminding yourself you don't have to be perfect. Just going for connection, not perfection.
So Pat Barcelos, do you want to unmute and ask your question, or do you want me to ask it for you? Pat?
Feel free, please.
Okay, super. So Pat has a question. In regards to job interviews in your home office, how can we be more confident on what we are saying about ourselves? So, I guess confident but not cocky, I guess would maybe be what she's hinting at.
We need to be able to be comfortable in advocating for ourselves. And many of us women have been taught that bragging is not good. So back to the lessons from our youth and how they influence. So being able to say, I'm fantastic at X, Y, and Z. How comfortable, Pat, are you? That's an exercise that I would encourage you to do, is take out your phone and record yourself saying what you're great at. I'm fabulous at, not what people say you're great at, not what you think you're good at, but what you are fantastic at. And see if you can do that to the phone, and then check out what happens to your language. And then try it again and try it again. And so I would say, get practice. What do you want them to know about you? Back to your brand. Maybe in your previous job, you were like the worker bee and you did everything, but you really want people to now see you as the strategic mind that you are. So how can you make sure that comes out in what you say?
Love that. Tanya says, John Wayne said, it's not bragging if you can back it up. Amen. And then
yeah, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
I've told that to my daughter. If you are okay, you need to be okay in asking for help when you need it. And you need to also be okay in owning your accomplishments. It's important. We can't expect that people can see it. So we have to be able to give it voice. So practice.
Love that. And Lisa Huang North says she recommends Toastmaster for anyone who wants to improve communication, especially public speaking. And she loves Joanne's advice and best practices. Awesome. So I guess we're wrapping up. We might have time for one more question. Tala, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Len. I know you already answered one of my questions, but we didn't get to it, so I just wanted to press it a little more. In my view, it seems like the self-deprecating humor, and a lot of the times when you open up meetings in offices, in my field, I'm sorry about the helicopter.
No worries.
We had a shooting in Brooklyn. I don't know if you got it, so they've been going over. So it's very male dominated. So women of color tend to be given, and you had this with the two women at your panel a few weeks ago, Lan, kind of relegated to the one question, or you kind of thinking it over. Okay, let me interject here, where it seems like 70% of the time it's kind of culturally led by a very westernized kind of self-deprecating norm, but very male dominated. And I wonder if you can address that. Thank you very much.
I'm not 100% sure what you're asking here, Tala. Lan, can you help me here?
Well, I think it kind of has to do with like in kind of more kind of what David was kind of mentioning earlier, which is this whole notion of we're in this male dominated kind of culture. How do we assert ourselves? And I'm paraphrasing, assert ourselves in these conversations, despite not having maybe the being, unique in our way of conversing. I totally butchered what but like, I mean, I think it comes down to authenticity in a lot of ways. Like, how do you become your authentic self when the way you approach things might be different? So for example, I grew up, before marketing, I was in the music industry, which is all male dominated. It was the 90s. I was in hip hop. It was very aggressive. And I felt like I had to play a role. Like I had to be someone else to be successful in that role. Like I couldn't be myself. I had to be music industry land. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And again, that's a story you're telling yourself. So the question is, are people, if you're in a job environment, it's a question I often pose on my courses, are you being asked to diminish actually? Or are you telling yourself that you've looked at something and you think that this is the best way for you to do it? So some of it can be some internal narratives that are driving behavior that may not even serve you. So there's that. I am reminded of one of my earlier, 30 years ago, I used to be in the rum business, Appleton rum, Jamaican rum, and I would travel across Canada meeting with the government liquor boards. I was maybe 25 and looked 18. The people I was in the meetings with universally were like 50-plus-year-old men. And I can remember back then trying to deepen my voice or some stupid 25-year-old strategy that I thought was going to make them think that this rep from Jamaica, me, was, up for the job. That was 100% in my head. Of course I was up for the job. I wouldn't have had the job if I wasn't up for the job. And so it comes back to what are you telling yourself? And if you want to have voice, you got to believe your voice matters. So this is head work. So if I found myself in a situation where I was actually being told, and this happened to me once, when I'm at a table, you must be seen and not heard. This was at a management level. I was like, well, dude, this is the wrong place for me. So if the environment is toxic and I can't thrive, then I'm going to bounce and find myself into an environment where I can be authentic. Hey, we've got somebody on the call.
Very outspoken here.
So I hope that helps answer this question. Some of it may be internal, or some of it may be a toxic environment that doesn't deserve you. We get to choose.
Yeah.
We have agency.
I am so inspired by this conversation. Unfortunately, time is up. So you guys know the deal. Put this in gallery mode. Joanne, before we leave, how can we help you? How can we find you? How can this collective group help?
We can help by, I believe when more of us communicate clearly, more of us will thrive. That's why I do the work that I do. My website is vate.ca. So nice and short, easy to find. I run programs, I blog. If you see something there you like, share it. Get the conversation going. Men are as much a part of this solution to minimizing language, which negatively impacts women, as women are. So, allies are all around. Increase the conversation. My website has resources to share with your teams. Send them the survey. And if somebody answers frequently to all of them, let them know they can make a change.
Love that. So everyone go into gallery mode, turn on your videos, turn on your audio, because Joanne deserves a round of applause. Once again, turn on your videos. Everyone on the Zoom call. Woohoo!
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Len.
you
This
so
was
much,
so
Joanne.
fun.
That was so inspiring. And we're creating the next future leader right here.
Yes, we are.
Bora, Molly.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. See you at the next one. Thank you, Joanne. You're the
Thanks.
best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.